My guest on today's episode is one of Dubai's freshest talents in music production, beat making, songwriting, and engineering. Formerly in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, he made his leap into music 4 years ago and hasn't looked back. In just short 4 years, he is now widely recognized within the GCC, Middle East, North Africa regions, and internationally for his impeccable talent and skills in the studio, producing R&B, hip-hop, pop, trap, neo-soul, progressive rock, and heavy metal. His Beat Lab video series has demonstrated his passion for production, his love of giving back to music communities, and has become increasingly popular in the world of music production, with over 3 million views, getting the attention from a long list of artists, labels, and has regularly been highlighted in regional and international press. Mohammad Bailouni, aka Rayan, producer, songwriter, engineer, and singer, has worked with a list of artists and provided many workshops, enriching and enhancing artists' careers as a number one priority in his work. In 2019 alone, he wrote and produced and engineered over 250 songs, hitting 11 million streams with 45 artists within different styles of music. On today's episode, we're discussing catharsis and diversity, starting with your big why and putting others first. Rayan, really excited to have you on the show. You're a very inspiring young man in the music industry. How you doing?
I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. It's an honor. I know the first time since we met, it's been a while since we've been able to speak, not to do with like work and what we do in our own professional and personal lives and stuff. So it's been a while. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And I've seen your work and what you've been doing over the last couple of years and just seeing it progress. And it's just been super inspiring. And I had to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
Welcome.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I know that you're in Greece now. You're like mid-quarantine, post-mid-corona thing, whatever it is now.
Yeah, kind of. Greece had a little spike recently. So it's, in certain areas, everyone's being super responsible and, but it is definitely a pleasure being on a Greek island and stuck in a big city right now. I can tell you.
Yeah. It beats Barsha Heights. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, mate, I was really intrigued by your catharsis and diversity. I read that and it came across to me that not only is it principles that you have in your life, in your music, but also in your life. And that's, tell me a bit about that and where did that all come from as part of, I guess, your creative process and your principles and around your music?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say that it's been a while. I've sort of felt those sorts of themes or concepts and why I like music for a while, but actually haven't been able to articulate it or find the word that explained it as well as catharsis and diversity. And it kind of is a summary of my journey through music. So prior to being a producer, the thing people knew me the most for was being like vocalist and guitarist in a heavy metal band. And I used to tell people that although I play metal and I'm in a metal band, I wasn't a metal head because it wasn't music that I grew up listening to. My mom raised me on like, Lionel Richie, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, all that stuff. So I always wondered, what was it about, such aggressive music that made me gravitate towards it? And why did I still like Craig David and, Usher and Aaliyah and all those 90s R&B classics? Like, how could I still sort of access emotions from both and feel as close to each one? And then I realized that a lot of the music that I listened to, even just over the last, 25 years, it's always been something extreme about it that I feel rather than how it sounds. And then when I started putting it together, I was like, it really is just the ability of the music rather than the genre of getting that certain emotion out of me, whether I've actually been through it or not. And I think it's the closest thing that we have to storytelling, like with film. So like sometimes even when you watch a sci-fi, or like a great example would be, I don't know if you've seen it, Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. So a lot of people would look at that movie and think it's a space movie or it's a sci-fi movie, when really it's actually a drama wrapped in a space sci-fi setting. It's about a father making a promise to his daughter that he'll be back. That's essentially the premise of the story. And I don't have a daughter, and I'm sure that there are people that, couldn't connect with that directly. But when you watch the movie, you go, wow, the promise that a parent can make, that's actually such a powerful thing that it's stronger than, whatever voyage you could go through space and time. So I think that's similar to how I kind of perceived music. And then that it kind of rolls on to diversity, because then I could listen to a song, for example, or even work with an artist that talks about addictions and talks about how they've completely destroyed his life and he's had to come out of it, or abuse, or it could be, incredible amount of love for someone. And I could not at that time be in a relationship, but it's the ability to drag that feeling out of me, and I can feel something tangible in so many different forms. And I think that also happens when I work with artists. When I meet them as human beings, I go like, I really connect with how this person makes me realize something, rather than he's got a good voice or she can really sing. I don't really look at it that way anymore. I look at it more as storytelling.
Yeah. To me, I find it it's almost a bit of a spiritual approach, if anything. And has spirituality been an important part of your upbringing? Is that something that you gravitated to, or?
Yeah, I think I would say that I have a natural tendency to be spiritual, if that makes sense. I think even outside of whatever my parents tried to pass on to me, because obviously my dad is a Muslim and my mom was a Christian, and she converted without my dad knowing. So it was by her own free will. Just in terms of Islam, for example, in terms of like spirituality and religion, I got very different ways to navigate how to feel about it and how to, access it, etc. Because they both came from such different backgrounds. And then I think in my teens, all the way through up until now, like I've actually put time and effort into learning about different religions, different theologies, different philosophies, and then just, understanding that we are conscious beings, and that, I believe in things like energy and like connecting with people, and that has a certain, like, even though you can't see it or feel it, it does exist. You know what I mean? Like coming into contact with people and then having, and all that stuff. And I think that's played a part in being able to let go, and that things will just naturally gravitate and happen. It doesn't have to be forced. But at the same time, also understanding good intention. Like it's not about like, I can plant the seed here, even though I have bad intentions, and it'll bring me profit, or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's, I think it's somewhere in the middle between all of those.
That's amazing. Look, I find it fascinating for someone at your age to be able to articulate that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's very rare that I meet people in their 20s that have this kind of insight around spirituality. And that
is that something that took you a while? It took you a while in your journey?
But yeah, I guess I was always intrigued with meditation and yoga from an early age. In my late teens, I didn't come from a religious background. In fact, it was quite the opposite in the household. But it was, I guess I was fascinated by Eastern philosophy, martial arts and yoga and yogic philosophy. It helped me with, I was just, I guess from an early age, it just always interested, like made me interesting. I guess from your side, like with your folks, I think it appears that because of the two religions, and growing up with that, it could almost have served as some kind of catalyst to make you dive in a little bit more to understand spirituality. Would you say that sounds about right?
Yeah, and I think it also comes from, I think even when you just strip away, because the way I sort of look at, it's like, it's funny. I'm actually happy we're talking about this, because everyone always has that taboo. Never talk about politics and religion, but I think it always depends on how open-minded you are to the conversation, rather than, it's something. But no, I think in general, like religion in general is humanity's way of filtering down a higher message or purpose from whatever it is that you believe in. So you could still be spiritual but not religious, and you could be, but obviously you can't be religious without being spiritual. But I think what happened between both of my parents was that my dad sort of had, if it was like a package, it's like the box I got delivered from my dad had culture, like I could see bits of culture wrapped around it. It's what he learned via his culture and his upbringing and passed it on to me, almost like it was like a epigenetic, sort of thing passed on to me. And my mom's was a lot more fluffy. My mom's was like, well, it's just like, you should just be good. That's really... Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
that sounds like my upbringing.
Yeah, you should just be good, Yeah. And my mom would just be like, even if it was something like, if my dad was telling me to do something because of religious reasons, my mom would be like, well, don't you want to be thankful? Like, she would break it down into such a simple form that I'm like, well, yeah, I am thankful that I have what I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think because I got both sides of it, and it's sort of like teaching, like people say, teaching out of fear and teaching out of love. I think I was able to get a bit of everything, so that by the time I got to adulthood, I was like, I would say I'm thankful that I got like a very balanced, I have a balanced argument within me, if that makes sense. So
Sure.
I can relate to people of all ilk, because I don't look at myself as any different in whatever sense. It's almost like, you know, when people say like, when you have an opinion or a preference, it's essentially still, it's based off of something else. So it's not like, you know, conflicting. If someone doesn't see things the way that I do, I actually find it more fascinating, because I do like, even today, I mean, like I delve into like so many different like ideologies and theologies. Sometimes I'll look at them and go like, that's not something that connects with me, but I find it very interesting how it would, you know, even whether it would be like yogic principles or karmic or whatever it is, that like even some people believe in like hermetic stuff and whatever it is. But it's interesting to look at and see, you know, what the principle of that whole thinking is, you know. Even really, I mean, my background is science, so I think sometimes science, you know, like how a lot of people do yoga and then they say that they have a very certain, well, catharsis, not to be a bit cringy, but like there's a certain catharsis that comes with it. You
sure, absolutely,
so much emotion, and then a scientist will come and say, no, that's not actually catharsis. That's actually the whatever mechanism, the biochemical mechanism that whatever happens. And you're like,
well, there's an explanation to it though, right? Yeah.
And sometimes I kind of think that science believes it's saying something different to these principles. And those principles think that it doesn't have to be scientific. And sometimes I feel like, I think the Pope said it the best. I can't remember which Pope it was, but he said, spirituality explains the world to us in a way in which we can't understand. Science explains the world to us in a way in which we can. It doesn't mean they're not telling the same story.
Yeah. So that's
I
agree.
That's how I kind of see it, you know?
Yeah. I'd have to agree with that. Well, you know, on that note, like I find that religion essentially, like they're all kind of really trying to say the same thing. And from what I understand, they're all explaining the very similar principles and similar messages. And so that's why I found like this music process of yours, Catharsis and Diversity, kind of fitting in a very aligned with all different religions. Kind of, it is a very open way of, and have you found this to be useful for you? Like, as when did this actually start for you? When did you actually kick in this sort of way of thinking with music?
It probably clicked. Like I sort of clicked into it the most, I would say around like 2014, 15, when I was kind of in my last phase doing stuff with the band into full-time production as a producer. Because when you have to meet so many different people, and I think sometimes I myself forget, I meet people and that doesn't mean that I'll end up working with them, but I've still met with them to discuss music and then maybe they've gone elsewhere. But having those conversations, I think one of the most beautiful things about music, and I think especially like, you know, for example, when me and you first met, I remember it was at Soul DXB.
When you were working with
Shaybani. Yeah, we were playing the gig.
Yes.
And
that's right.
I remember we were talking, I don't know if it was before or after someone was playing, but then just in general, when you start discussing music and this song and this style and this vibe, the beautiful thing about music is that you'll find that you're able to connect with something that you can't articulate with somebody else through the music. So someone will be like, I really love that part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you know this song? Oh yeah, me too. I love that part. Suddenly this commonality, it's not just that we both know and like the song, it's that
same emotion.
It's an emotion. So when I speak to artists, whether I work with them or not, I started to realize from then on, maybe I didn't have the words for it, but I figured that I was like, it's amazing how someone could tell me something about music and I know what song and what part they're talking about. I remember how that made me feel and I go, yeah, that made me feel the same way. And then suddenly you feel closer to someone. So it made me realize it doesn't matter who and where you're from and what you think and whatever. If you can do that in music, you can get someone that sort of, I wouldn't call it goosebump moment, but someone could listen to it and go, almost lose their thoughts for a second and be like, wow, yeah, I never thought of it that way, or that line really hit me. I think you've done your job as an artist. So it's something that I always try to do. Like, I never try and never really want anyone to come in and be like, I want to write a club banger so that we can get 10 million views and then move on to the next. And I'm like, yeah, like, you know, it has its value, but it's
you have clients that approach you with that kind of mentality.
all the time. It's horrible. And sometimes, and it's so hard to reply to someone that goes like, listen, man, just give me 145 BPM, A minor, just throw in a couple of claps and kicks, and I'm just gonna make a bad boy club banger. And I'm like, how am I supposed to tell this guy to tell a story when he's just come in saying like, you know, so it's tough. It's tough. And I think I feel the friction sometimes when I can feel. The thing is, I can always tell. I don't know, and because I think something I bring up a lot, and I think people underestimate it. But like social and especially emotional intelligence and awareness is such a big thing. When I can tell someone's showing me friction, not because I'm forcing them to do something, but deep down they're like, I know that you're right, but entertain me, I'll entertain it. Because I'm like, it's one step at a time. So if I see that guy say, give me a 145, whatever kicks and claps. And I'm like, yeah, man, like, you know, like, what are you trying to say? Or like, are you trying to do 1, 2, 3? If they're like, and you can see that they're like, yeah, you're right, I should have a point to this. I don't milk it all the way. I'm like, he's not going to feel happy if I do that. So let it sit for a bit, and then I'll bring it back up, or I'll bring it up in a certain verse, and I'll be like, maybe try something like this for the lyric. And he's like, I really like that. That's great. A lot of people connect to that.
Right. What I'm hearing from this is that, do you find, have you found from certain clients that you need to kind of like, if they come to you in that way, you got to lead them a little bit to kind of open up and come more with their heart, you know, like
that's exactly
what I mean. Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. I feel like when they don't come with their heart, it's a bit cold, and I think the song turns out that way. And I think sometimes, the big thing that I do, I almost try to do it all the time, is that when I'm working with someone for the first time, I'll be like, send me everything you listen to. Send me everything. Like, even if it's something that like, I didn't even really like this song, but it's my guilty pleasure. Or,
right,
I used to like the song when I was 12, but I can't stand it anymore. Send me everything. Because then what I'll do is, like, for example, just for consistency's sake, for that guy that wants a club banger record, whatever, I can't really push on him and say like, yeah, man, but you can't just write a song. And I'm just super confrontational, because he's just going to be like, just record me, man. That's what your job is. And then it's just sour. It's not going to get any better from then on, you know?
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll be like, maybe while he's in the middle of a verse, I'll be like, bro, do you know that line that you like from Drake's song, or that Weeknd song, or that ABC song? I think the reason why people like it and you like that line is because they're able to get across, for example, a girl's point of view narrated through a guy.
And they realize, and they go,
yeah, that is actually why I like it. We should do something like that. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm using what he likes, and I understand him more than he has to understand me. And I think that's when I go like, you've got to put other people first, because you've got to know who that person is before they walk in.
Right.
And then like, so for example, like I know a few, the clients that I work with have social anxiety. So small things like, listen, by the way, just heads up, next guy's coming in about 25 minutes. He's like, yeah, let's wrap up in 20.
Right.
So he might be like, I just want to avoid any like confrontation. I don't want to say hi. It kicks in. I'm not really comfortable. I'd rather do it in a much more social setting than like sat here. Or someone is very particular about anyone hearing anything. So I'll be like, oh, by the way, my next session is coming in an hour. Let's set a timer at 50 minutes so we can export and then bounce in case they come early. But small things like that. Or some people love to get other people's feedback. I'm like, oh, next person's coming in 30. Let's take a 10-minute break now. So when they come in, if you want anyone else to give you some feedback, I can have it on play while they walk in. But I think people that appreciate that I'm putting them first before me going like, listen, I've got to be finished at 6:30. You've got to wrap it up. The reason is because I want to end it, not that it's in their best interest. So small things like that, I think make a big difference, because then later on when you're working with them, they understand that you give a lot. Then when you have this, maybe a bit of a tough, I don't know if it's like criticism, or you're like, yeah, I wasn't really feeling that. They're like, he wouldn't do something if he didn't mean it for my best interest. But that's not just by saying things, it's by showing things with it, or I'll order 2 coffees for me and the client, and I know they have like an allergy to cow's milk. So I'll get cashew milk, and it'll already be here. Like small things like that, because then they're like, oh, he knows that, that gets me in the zone, or,
No, I like it, man. That's great awareness and being conscious there as well. I would like to talk more about that as well, like, because I see that quite as a theme in your work is, and again, I find it again another spiritual approach is like putting others first there. But before I do, you mentioned that you made the leap from your previous work and from previous music, and this is also part of your work is teaching people how is sort of getting over that fear and anxiety and having that faith in themselves to work full time with music, and you made that leap. So that's also part of a lot of your work is with your clients is sort of bringing and changing those little nuances and within themselves to develop that confidence and that internal, I guess, the GPS inside yourself to feel comfortable about taking and working full time in music.
Yeah.
Because, I always find that if you're kind of sitting there waiting, if I get there, then I'll do it, then you'll never do it.
Yeah.
And that's also in the same way of the consciousness of thinking. If you're constantly thinking, well, I won't fully dedicate myself to music until I get that, then you're kind of going to be on that treadmill. So how did you get to that realization, and also you putting that into your work as well? When did you start to, and how do you articulate that with your clients?
That's a great question, because I had trouble articulating this myself till I read some article, and it was about, I don't even remember if it was something to do with like just some entrepreneurial thing, or if it was like, working out or something. It was something simple, but they explained it so perfectly. They said being result driven or process driven. And they're like, the problem with being driven by results, or you could say like target driven, is that, like you're saying, for example, if I tell myself that I'm going to go to the gym and I want to lose 20 kgs, if I do that, I'll be happy. Right? You could lose 18 kgs and you're not happy because you haven't hit the 20. And you could hit the 20 and then you gain a bit of weight because it's Christmas weekend and you've had a couple of turkey dinners or whatever it is, and then you've gained a kilo back and you feel like crap, and you're just like, all that work at the gym, because in your mind you've placed your happiness on this target. And it becomes so hard to maintain, because then, even though some people say, you keep setting new targets, I'm like, but if you know yourself really well, all you're doing is living to make a target happen. You're not living. So when you're process driven, you would be like, I want to go to the gym every day for the rest of my life for 30 minutes. That's just what I do. And what happens. I could lose 40. I could lose 60.
That's a byproduct of the symptoms.
It's a byproduct of me being healthier. And I think that.
So you've applied this with your work.
And that's what I apply with my work. So that I tell myself, it's about what you're doing every day. It's not about the targets you're hitting. I can celebrate the targets. Yeah. And I think that's where consistency comes from, but I tell myself if I have no sessions in a particular day, or it's a weekend or something, I'd be like, okay, you can take this day off, but I'll look back at my week and I'll go like, how many new ideas did I start? How many people did I check up on to see where they are with things? Or, how much new music did I listen to? How many beats did I start? And then I'll go like, I'm going to do that tomorrow, because I should be doing this stuff weekly in general. And then rather than me going like, I have to do this many a month, which could happen anyways. But then if I'm hitting that target and I just set a new target, it's like the minute I set that new target, I'm disappointed already. And then I'm now working to not be disappointed that I'm not hitting that target yet. I think it does work for some people, but I think for me in my life, and especially what I try to do with artists, is I tell them, like, my fiance explains it so well, because we always talk about, like, where's the line between talent and art? Because I think sometimes it's very easy, even for the most, experienced, even me and you, if we went to a gig and someone was such a good singer, we'd be like, wow, right? And that wow kind of hits you. And then you go like, what an incredible artist. But I think sometimes we bandy the word around a bit too much. And it's like, Bob Dylan was an incredible artist, but couldn't sing for his life. You know what I mean? And then you go like, well, he honestly, I know people in Dubai that sing 10 times better than Bob Dylan ever did.
Yeah.
But
I hear
you couldn't touch him for artistry, because he's one of the top all times. Ideally, even people listen to old stuff like, even the Beatles, and you couldn't say the Beatles were as good at singing, or as a band, for example, maybe as good as maybe Queen in terms of what they did and technicality and stuff. But artistically, you're like incredible,
Yeah.
So I think when my fiance, she said she's like, it's all about how you translate your charisma. And I think that's when it clicked with me. And I'm just like, yeah, that's what I need to help people realize. You need to find certain principles about your art, not who you are, just what you want to say to the world. And as a process, how are you getting that out? Because you might realize that you're a visual artist that needs music. You're not a musical artist that needs visuals, for example. And so there are some people that are like, I think a great example would be like Bjork, if you know Bjork. Mm-hmm. So Bjork is very much like a visual artist. When you see her, you start to really understand what her music's about. While there are other people where you don't even need to see them. I think like HER was a great example when she first came out. You didn't even know what she looked like, but it hit you so hard. You're like, wow, this music is amazing. So I think that's what I try to get across to people. And I think once people are confident about what they want to say, they know how they want to say it, and they just go every day like, have I done anything today to say what I have to say? It could be making a pot. It could be, I don't know, it could be taking a picture with a cool filter on, but they're trying to get this principle across. And I think I think when you know why you're doing something, then you don't really worry too much about how and what you're doing, because it's there. You're like, I've got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tomorrow.
Because a lot of the processes and these tactics and the way your approach is, have you had like experience in sort of I guess in personal development world, or has that been something where you've done a lot of homework in and research as well, and use that into your own sort of work? Or because I mean have you, or is it just something that you've kind of learned along the way?
I think along the way.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely really, that's fascinating.
I mean, thank you. I don't know whether it's also to do with age. I mean, I think sometimes age does, like, it calms you down in a very, I mean, I wouldn't say like, I'm not that old, but I think with age, I think you start to rationalize things a lot clearer than when you're younger, because maybe you're a lot more like, maybe emotionally driven about things because everything is like a new experience and whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, James. Like when I was younger, I was a prick. Like I'm talking about like pre-15, 14 years old. Like my family always go like, never, if like, I had like a temper, and I was like, if I didn't get something my way, I was like a brat, like, about everything, And I don't know how it happened. I just know that my parents told me that when I hit that 19, 20, 21, everything just became very still for me. And I don't know if that's just maybe because like I had a bit of a temper. Then when I went through puberty, it just settled down. And maybe if it was other way around, right. I would have gone like, you always hear that about like psychopaths. He was such a nice kid. And then they end up like killing 400 people. And you're like, and then they show you these baby pictures. And then he's like, with like the most beautiful tie and suit on. And I was like, yeah, so I wasn't that kid. Maybe that's why. So I don't know. I think also it's got to do maybe with a bit of age, but like I always hear that it's a bit like with, when people go like they self medicate through Google or self-diagnose, sorry. And then they go like, experiencing flu-like symptoms. And you're like, oh my God, it's like, have I got, Down syndrome? It's like, no, everything starts with flu-like symptoms. That's what your body does, So it's a bit like that. So I don't know. I guess maybe it's age, I suppose.
But you haven't hit 30 yet, have you?
I'm 33.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I look a lot older than my age, I suppose, but
right. I thought you were in your late 20s. So there you go.
I still get ID'd when I go to clubs. It's ridiculous. I got my ID taken and the guy's like, there's no way you're over 21. I was like, bro, I know that this is an embarrassing beard, but I'm definitely over 21,
Well, enjoy it, man. Enjoy it.
I think I'll enjoy this when I'm 50. When I'm 50, I'll be like, I'm looking boss. I'm looking like I'm 40. Yeah. But I mean, do you not feel that with age that things became a lot more still for you, like in your mid to late 20s?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I would say after 34, 35, I became a bit more chilled.
Yeah.
My years, but yeah, like I said before, I meditation and yoga have been a big part of my life. So that they were kind of like, that was the kind of thing that I had that kept me sort of, grounded, and I would return back to, whenever I felt myself veering off, and so I've been an regular yogi and meditation guy, but like it's still, I haven't got my certificate to teach as well. When I first moved to Dubai, not many people know, but I was teaching yoga for 2 years.
Really?
Until I found my music network, because I came there to develop a music network, and then and I was 34, 35. So
So when did you start doing yoga full time? Or practicing it, I mean.
Well, practicing, I started when I was about 22, 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been a while now. And then I later did a course with it as well. And and the thing is that, you go through a lot of judgment, people thinking, because you're a yogi or you do yoga, then you shouldn't drink or you shouldn't eat meat and all that. No, it's like, I don't know. People think that when you do yoga, you've joined some kind of cult or something.
Or like some sort of like hipster group.
It's just it is a lot more than just stretching. You are getting, you are getting in touch with your learning to come with your body and your mind and that's what yoga means.
Centering yourself.
It means union. It means union. And it's learning how to, when you're on the yoga mat, you're learning how to like the struggles and the trial, like the things that are going through your mind while you're doing your postures, and while you're, it's a metaphorical way of how you're living your life.
Of course.
So it's kind of, the yoga mat is the plaintiff of life,
No, of course.
So, yeah. Anyway, I like in with regards to teaching your students or clients and that come to you and helping them with that process. You mentioned, I read about that. The finding the big why is super important in that process. And just tell me a little bit about that. Like when you find that coming from a place of why is better than a place of coming from how.
So I think, one of the a concept that I preach a lot, but it's obviously not my own. It's based off of the Simon Sinek talk, the Golden Circle, which is a really popular, really popular talk.
Awesome.
And it's a talk that like really changed my life, because it was one of probably the last things that I watched before quitting my job in pharma and then moving country back to Dubai to do music full time. So
where were you before? Where were you before?
I mean, when I was 3 months old, my parents brought me to Abu Dhabi. So I spent my whole life there.
Right.
From 18 onwards, I went to the UK to do my bachelor's and master's and all that stuff. And then in that time that I was in the UK, my dad had moved to Doha. So I was in Doha before I came back to Dubai.
Got it.
That's where I did the pharma stint and all that stuff. So, so it was one of the last videos I watched before I did that. And I think just when he drew it as that like 3-circle thing, and he's like, all of the greatest thinkers and minds in the world go from why, how, what. They go inwards to out, while 99% of the rest of the world go from out to in. And I thought about it, and I'm like, when you ask someone like, oh, James, so what do you do? And you're like, well, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're like, oh, really? How does that work? And you go, yeah, well, I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Someone's like, so why do you do it? And then it gets very vague very quickly. And then you go, oh, just, yeah. And then you hear all the filler, I love music. I love, and when he said that, it was very moving for me, because I'm like, and I actually, I kind of put this across in one of the boot camp sessions that I did for the Nomad thing in SAE. And I took this clip, and it's so powerful. I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, I'll send it to you. It's like this 1 minute 30 clip of Bill Gates just before, I think it was the Mac 2 came out. So this was like 1988, 1990-esque.
Right. Okay.
And somebody asks him, so why did you start Apple? It's such a strong start,
You mean
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Sorry, yeah,
right,
Steve Jobs. Sorry, yeah. So they ask Steve Jobs, so why did you start Apple? And Steve Jobs, I mean, when I'm watching this, I'm just like, that's a big question. And the type of answers you're expecting is, well, I've always wanted to do something with technology, or I wanted to. You're expecting these keywords, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he comes out and he says, I'll make it very short, but he goes, when I was really young, I read this National Geographic magazine, and they had done this comparison chart of all the animals or species in the world, how efficient they are at locomotion. So how much calories do they expend to move a certain distance? And at the top of it was the Commodore, because the Commodore could just soar and fly, and it's off, and it can cover great distances with very little energy spent. And he's like, the kind of crown of creation of man came like third all the way down the list of all these species. So he was like, but then someone had the imagination to put a human on a bicycle. And the human on a bicycle blew the Commodore out the water, like completely destroyed it. So he's like, so it made me realize that man, or humanity, we are tool builders, that whatever we don't have given to us by Mother Nature, we'll build. We can't fly, we'll build a plane. We can't move fast, we'll build a car. We can't talk long distances, we'll make a phone. He's like, so that's what Apple is. I wanted to create a company that could bridge the gap between the things that humans don't have and make it possible. I'm like, what? How could you not want to buy a phone from him after that? You know what I mean? Like you're thinking of it like I'm a higher evolved species, like I'm higher up in the food chain if I have an Apple phone. And I think that's where this whole people that don't have Apple, they go, oh, you've got an Apple. Oh, and they have that a snobby thing. And it's like, well, it's part of the branding and it's part of the story. But it was so moving, because I'm like, when I ask an artist, and I think the biggest question is not why do you do what you do? The biggest one for me is, why should other people care? Because I think, especially for
I like that.
Because I mean, like if you say to me, I wake up every single morning and I love to do podcasts and I love to interview people and it's like, cool. So keep doing it. But maybe, if you're a singer and you're like, I just love to sing and I love to whatever, someone's going to be like, that's good for you, man. Like keep going. I'm still listening to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a lot of people, especially a lot of artists, they suffer with like people are not connecting, or people aren't, really sort of, taken too much by the music, and that could all be production, which is the how and what, but the fiber, the why of what you do should be, why should other people care? Because if someone understands that the reason why you do something, I really care about that reason, your music becomes mine. And I think that's when it goes back, to what we were saying when me and you both listened to Aaliyah and we liked a certain section. It's because we've made it our own. And therefore, I'm not even thinking about Aaliyah. I'm just going, James gets it. Me and James have something in common. I'm not even thinking about her because it's my song now. And I think that only comes when a person really knows. They're just like, and sometimes it changes, which is okay. And sometimes I think, like, I do work with a bunch of people even now where I'm like, they need a bit of time to figure that out. That needs to sit with them for a little bit. You need to actually go like, yeah, why? Because if anyone gave me an answer when I ask it, I'm like, it's not a real answer, because you've got to search really deep within who you are and go like, you need to be self-aware. You need to be like, how was I brought up? What do I think about the world? What do I think is wrong? What do I think is right? What am I passionate about? And I think, I just think like, it's so hard to answer, but I think I would rather spend 2 months figuring out why and never worry about it for the rest of my life than keep releasing music and then someone knows me for something and then suddenly I've changed and I just look disingenuous to that fan. They're going like, what's got anything to do with what you were doing before? So I think starting that off is a big thing, and like I said, sometimes I don't relate to it's maybe not something that's curated for me there. Why? But then that's when I go like, oh, but that's like watching a film. I've never been to space, but the part I pick out is the father telling his daughter he'll be back. And then I'm like, that's the part of your story that I get. So if I have someone that's talking to me about like drug addiction, or they're talking about how it was the darkest phase of their life, I go, yeah, I've been addicted to something, or a certain behavior in my life, and that was my darkest part. So I understand that it may not be the drug of choice, or it may not be narcotics in general, but I'm like, I know how that feels. I know how a person is in that state. Maybe not the side effects of what you've done, but the mentality of it, I get. It should feel this way, and you should sing it this way, and then it shouldn't make me feel comfortable, or stuff like that. I'm kind of like digressing a bit, but you get what
it's all right. Yeah, no, amazing.
I mean, do you not feel that way though? Like when you listen to music, sometimes especially like you were saying before, like if you've gone through a certain experience, do you not listen to like even like really upbeat music, but you're like, I remember when I was in a certain time and I remember listening to this type of music, and it's like nostalgic. It could even be a nostalgia.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I totally connect that way with music. I guess when I'm hearing new things now as well, new music, it will resonate with something that connects the dots from the past, or, so yeah, totally.
But I mean, totally. This is interesting because I know that you're one of the people that I know from not even very long chats that we've had, but I know that you really know your 90s R&B. I know that's like, that's like your thing. So
it's one of my things. Yeah, I have a passion for it. I grew up on that music. It was a big part of my upbringing, and I guess that's what I really liked about and loved about the music that you and Shabani were doing together as well. It's what really connected with, and yeah, so yeah, I do have a strong passion for it.
Do you feel like that music's coming back stronger than ever now?
I don't know if I would say. I think it's had, like, it's still there. That I feel like that came. It's still, the influences are still having its impact on new R&B or new soul. But there was a period, and I would say around when I met you guys, that was around there was a period where, there was a period where there was that resurgence of that sound.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it's very prominent now. Like, I think right now people are really interested in hearing new original stuff, I think, and new music. And if it does grab influences from the 90s or early 2000s, and so be it. But there was a significant period, maybe in the last few years, where it was about 90s revival.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think it was around the time that Drake had the Hold On, We're Going Home, and then the I Can't Feel My Face with The Weeknd. They were doing that whole thing. It's weird now. I feel like it's kind of, I thought this was going to happen about 2 years ago. I was like, this might happen. And then it didn't happen. I'm like, oh, I messed that one up, but it's sort of happening now. It's the resurgence of disco is like massive now. It's like,
disco comes and goes. I mean, I'm known as a disco DJ amongst house music. So disco has never really
died.
In my opinion, has never really died. It's the kind of essence of dance music. When it comes to club music, it's there. It's always been there. It dips in and out, and it has its little phases where it becomes a little bit more in the mainstream eye, and then it goes back into the underground again. It comes back up again. It goes back into the underground. But it's always there. Disco's always there.
Do you know what I actually just found out where the word disco comes from?
What?
Do you know this?
Tell me. I'm intrigued.
So what? I forgot where I heard this. So the word disco comes from the change of how clubs used to play music. So a long time ago, it would be the big band Frank Sinatra stuff. And people then used to say, oh, just play it off the disc, off the cassette. Like that's all you need, or play it off the disc. So then it became the disco where you wouldn't see a live band play. They would just play music back from disc.
Right.
It became the disco. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so obvious when you think about it. It's so obvious. Yeah, so I just found that out the other day. I think maybe it was my mom that was telling me or something. And I'm like, is that why they call it disco? And she's like, of course, man, you're talking about, like it's disco. Of course it's disco. And I'm like, well, it makes sense. Then you have the disco ball. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Now we're somewhere. Yeah.
And the DJ is disc jockey.
Disc jockey. Right? Yeah, well, there you go, right? Yeah, we're becoming increasingly aware of how naive we are to the Yeah, no, I just found out the other day. I'm like, that's so obvious. I can't believe I didn't think that.
Well, look, as you mentioned, like disco and funk, I always find kind of exists in various sounds, and there are a lot of artists that are kind of like pull from those sounds all the time. So, and the thing is, even if it's not popular at the moment, if someone comes out with a track that's super fun and it pulls from that culture, everyone connects with it anyway. Like it's not like, oh, that was so 2 years ago. No, people will just go,
that's so true.
You know what I mean? Like they connect with it anyway because it has such a funk and disco and soul music. It's part of music, it's there, So,
I think it's also because a lot of the new genres are subgenres of those soul, disco,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think the other one that I know that my mom raised me on a lot of Motown. So like a lot of like
she was a good mom.
Yeah, she was a good mom. She's a good mom. It's so funny. My mom, I always tell people like my mom, who is like super white, is like the least white woman in the world when it comes to her music. Cause she'd play the most random stuff. And I'm like, Mom, like this is not what the other kids are listening to. She's like, oh, white man, this is proper music, like don't listen to none of that, so I think and it's interesting because my mom really knows her soul music. Because I remember, this is a funny story. So I remember the first time, me and my sister play pranks on my mom all the time, right? God bless her. So sometimes we'll do something like super stupid and be like, Mom, do you know what that is? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 5. She's like, never. We're like, oh, we're just joking. So one time I told my sister, I'm like, look, I'm going to play Mom Drake and get her reaction. Like those old people react to whatever music. So I put the headphones on my mom and I play her Hotline Bling. Right. And then she's like, oh, I know
the groove.
Yeah.
She picked the groove at the start.
Yeah. She's like, ooh, I know this one. Oh, I love this song. And I'm like, what? I'm like, Mom, what song are you listening to? And she just goes, that's Timmy Thomas. And I'm like, what? And this was like 3 days into Hotline Bling. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, it's not. She goes, it's not. And then she did the, ooh, that. And it didn't happen. She heard, you used to call me on myself. She's like, what's this? Take it off. You know, like, and I'm like, what's that? She goes, search Timmy Thomas. And then that's when I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You've got a good ear for like,
I picked it straight away.
You must have. Like when she told me how iconic it was, I was like, oh my goodness, anyone that was, man. I mean, and the thing is, it's like, so whenever I hear her like new music, I go like, there must be something really good about this song for it to connect with one of like the OG genres. You know what I mean? I mean, have you actually, interesting. Have you not picked up any new songs that have like sampled obvious samples? No, maybe not as obvious as that though.
Nothing that rings a bell right now, but I mean, I hear when it comes to club music, and I hear a lot of samples in club music made for DJs, like that.
Right.
For the, like I was just listening to a Hot Toddy track. Well, it's actually on my next episode.
Oh, nice.
Of and it samples a band called Slave.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, it was Steve Arrington's band, and I'm like, I could hear it in the background, and I'm like, because I was just before we got on the call, I was listening because as you know, I was doing my radio shows here, and so this is the third show that's coming out this weekend. So I was listening to it just now before we got on, and I was just like, I know that sample. I could hear it in the background, like, and so that I hear that a lot in club music, like in the stuff, particularly with a lot of the things that I play. A lot of soulful house, a lot of techno, as well. That you hear those elements, and you hear that they've taken like bass lines, or they've taken parts, and also you might even hear like a little loop of a vocal, and you go, I know that vocal, you know?
Yeah. Because I think I honestly I'm jealous of DJs, because I think that DJs have a very acute. It's sort of like a detection system where they'll know just with the job in general, you guys will know, like, I'm going to play this BPM. This is going to move. This is going to move whatever's happening in front of me. This is going to move them. And the ability to know, like, just forget mixing songs in general, but the ability to like, influence behavior, like so quickly with like, I'm going to move to this, and I'm going to, I'm going to shift over to this and whatnot, and feel a room and respond. Like, it's such a great, DJs in general are such great people to show your music to, because whether you're trying to play it in a club or not, they'll be like, yeah, that'll move. That's going to move people in different ways. But they may not know, like, you've got to have a bit more compression or a bit more echo, like whatever. But I can tell you that that's a solid track. Yeah.
I'd have to agree with you there, and that comes over time as well. Like, especially the more times you've actually played to crowds, you learn behavior. You learn to watch what's going on, what emotions on how people react to certain things, and so I would say, even when I'm playing records, there's a narrative, there's a story, and there's I'm wanting to, for a better, to take them on a journey.
Yeah. No,
but it is very much about that, and I develop a skill where you are thinking about 3 tracks ahead.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like the fact that you're like on a certain song and enjoying it, and you're like, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3. It reminds me sort of like a fighter that's like, Have you ever seen the new Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr.?
Yeah, of course.
So when it goes, break third rib, impact liver. That's how it feels. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are moving in slow motion, and you're like, break fibulous bone, whatever. Boom, boom, and then you and normal is like, what? And then you start playing the next thing and everyone's like, whoa, you know? Yeah.
Well, that kind of awareness when you're DJing really comes when you're sober. So if you're drinking on the job, but you know what though, that can be argued. that can be argued. If you are sometimes it is all about a feeling. For me personally, I DJ much better with a clear head and really put myself in the room, you know.
Well, this is a very hot topic because a lot of so this happens a lot because sometimes obviously, you know, you'd have the random, you know, big artist that comes through Dubai that wants to record while they're here, and then, you know, it's a bit of a taboo to like bring up, you know, any influences that might affect the session. And then you'll have some that just go like, I know I've got to have a clear head. And then there are some that are like, if there's nothing here, this is not happening today. It's crazy. Because I mean, I even remember my uncle, God bless him, he was, we used to jam guitar when I was at uni. I would go every Sunday because I was there alone. So with no family, he used to pick me up and take me on Sundays to go play guitar. We would watch like X Factor and then have like Sunday roast and then play guitar until he was like drunk enough to go to sleep. And he couldn't play without having a drink. He just couldn't. It wouldn't happen for him. And it could just be. And I don't even know if it was a placebo thing, but he would just like. I always remember
It's a combination. Yeah, it's a combination. You know? Like if you've trained yourself that way, then it takes time to unlearn that as well. Yeah, you know, like if you've learned how to do that and it becomes like anything that you get used to doing. It's a habit and. That's why it's difficult. And especially if you reach a point where you think that you've developed a belief system that you think that your great work and your good work comes out only when you are under the influence, then that's even harder because you've attached yourself to that belief that you think that you need it to do good work.
And then you're dependent on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's another great conversation there, buddy.
Because it happens a lot. You know, it's something that comes up a lot, and you'll hear people like sometimes it's sort of like the excuse, like, oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I'm like you. I've always taken it that I've got to be so clear-minded, and I also think it's like when I used to play shows with the band, I would be like, I need to be 300% sober. Because that little bit of fear that kicks in my adrenaline, if I can manage this, the next show, that's my new 0. And then if that goes up, that's my new 0. And then you can only get
that kind of awareness if you're sober. Like honestly, I feel that like my early years of DJing, I was under the influence, drinking, and like I would have. Look, I had a great time.
It was a party where I was.
But I later on I realized that there was more to, and it goes back to what we were talking about before. You know, your why. You know, like, and I found that I wasn't aligned with a real purpose or a real. You know, behind why I'm actually a DJ, why am I doing this? And so I, over time, kept peeling those layers to get to that core to do that, you know?
Do you ever look back at your old stuff and go, oh my God?
No, actually, you know, I would have added, you know, if I look back at old mixes that I thought were really bad, and I think it's because I was in a place where I was very critical and judgmental. Now, if I look back at it, I'm like, actually, that was pretty good stuff, you know. Like, so sometimes we are so judgmental of ourselves. We're so critical, and you know, we can really not give ourselves enough credit for stuff. And I think that comes with learning to, you know, appreciate and self-confidence and. You know, like just being able to also understand that that's part of the process as well. And, you know, it is, it's.
And I think a big part of it is being comfortable with failing or losing because it's part of the process. And I think that's also a very big like sort of cultural thing that a lot of people grow up with. Like, failure is somewhat subliminally attached to shame. So you don't want to feel ashamed. So you think if you've lost, you should feel ashamed of something, when really it's like, I think all of the biggest minds that I know or I've heard of, they all go, lose as much and as quickly as you can. Like, just do it. Because if you know how to lose, you'll know it before it happens. You've learned the sort of like the 3 songs ahead. You can see the signs like, no, I know what this is going to be.
Yes.
So it's someone that was in the studio the other day said it so well. They're like, hey, if anyone ever said to me that they've never lost a fight, they've never taken a punch. Because if you would only be good at fighting if you've had your face kicked in and you're just like, that's not happening
that's exactly
again.
Right. That's exactly
it's
right.
It's the same concept. So when someone's like, I don't know, I've never had a bad record. Okay. How many songs do you have? I've got like 8 albums out. Something's not right there, because I mean, like, and I think sometimes, this actually happened today, earlier this morning. I had a session and someone was like, I don't know if I want to put this song out because I don't think it's the best song that I've ever done. And I said, well, do you think every Drake song that you've ever heard that ended up being your new next best ever favorite Drake song? And they're like, no. I mean, there are Drake songs that I don't like. I'm like, yeah, he releases them.
He just gets them out. Get them out, man.
Yeah, I think that's when you have to learn not to wear your fan hat and wear your artist hat and wear your business hat, because you can only have one at a time. So when I have my artist hat on, I actually don't care if people like it or not. I just care that I've served my why through this song. It's out. Yeah. And then my fan hat is, I might have personal favorites of my songs, or you might have favorite mixes of your mixes. And someone's going to come up to you and say, I didn't like that mix. And you'll be like, I loved it. Yeah. But we're 2 fans. I'm not the artist anymore. I'm just a fan. I just so happen to be the person you can talk to about it. But I think that's why people struggle with it, because they try to wear it all at the same time, all different hats. They're like, oh, this is my favorite song, but this song is not going to sell. And a lot of people said they don't like it. I'm like, whoa, there's so much going on in that statement. It's crazy. You either felt that you feel good about what you've done with this song. Then once that hat is off, you put it on and you go like, I think this song would be really good for ABC, which is your business hat on. And then once that's all done and you've delivered that, you've executed that, then when it's out and people are telling you, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think that song was great and not bad. That's when you can be like, yeah, it's not my favorite, but it's doing really well. Yeah. But it's hard to do that. You've got to be really, really self-aware. I mean, I'm sure you're like that. Even when you're like you said, you listen to an old mix and you go, that was good. That was good. Absolutely. I think, there's a lot to take away in that process. Look, we're out of time. Are we? Oh goodness! I feel bad. Sorry.
No. It's absolutely fine. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. There's really, really great to learn more about your approach and your processes and your whys. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed.
Honestly, James, thank you so much for having me on, man. And I know you're going to be back in town soon, and obviously depending on this whole Corona thing, let's please keep in touch. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
We'll tell the listeners where they can find you and hear some of your stuff.
Sure. So my Instagram is m_Bailouni, m_BAILOUNI. They can also check out my website, rayanproducer.net. If you're in Dubai and you're in town and you want to do something musical, or you just want to talk music stuff, then just DM me or email me and we'll do
check
something.
Out Beat Lab.
My Beat Labs. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I'm trying to do it every Sunday. Every Sunday I'll have a new Beat Lab out, which is sort of like me showcasing some of my brainstormed ideas from the studio up on Instagram. So
it's amazing. It's a great show. I'd highly recommend it.
Thank you, brother.
Check it out.
No, brother. Stuff. Thank you so much for having me on. And listen, when you're in Dubai, please let me know when you've touched down safe and sound.
For sure, man. For sure. And thank you, Rayan.
Thanks
so much, man.